So I think driving systemic change where the system itself changes and hence the change is sustainable is the way that we feel most sustainable change can be brought about.
Today we have with us Mekin Maheshwari, founder Udhyam Learning Foundation and co-founder Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, G.A.M.E. An engineer by education, Mekin has had entrepreneur roles throughout his career. He started his career in 2002 with Yahoo and went on to join Ugenie, where he created weRead, a successful social network around books. He moved to Flipkart in 2009 as an early team member, where he played various roles and went on to build two small startups within Flipkart before he finally took on the role of Chief People Officer. He moved on from Flipkart in March 2016 and has since been focused on social development at scale. Mekin deeply cares about people realizing their potential and succeeding in life. Udhyam Learning Foundation emerged from this unwavering faith that human potential is intrinsic and universal, waiting to be discovered. Mekin is also the co-founder of G.A.M.E, Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, and a volunteer at ACT Grants. He invests primarily in edtech and ex-flipster startups and works with social organizations that believe in nurturing human potential. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here with us, Mekin.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so to begin with, I want to get an idea of how has entrepreneurship impacted your career and your journey leading up to the beginning of Udhyam Learning Foundation?
I think entrepreneurship in very different ways has been part of my life from an early stage. Just to give a glimpse, as a child, we moved a lot. So I ended up studying in about 7 schools. And every one of those moves meant that you had to get into a new place and start from scratch, which is basically what an entrepreneur has to do, and keep adapting to newer locations. I feel similarly about my professional life. At Yahoo, where the Yahoo Bangalore office was being set up, was the first office outside of Silicon Valley that Yahoo was setting up for development. And we were a very small team trying to build the Yahoo Bangalore office from scratch. So again, that experience of starting up or starting at a very small scale and growing that or helping grow that, I experienced that firsthand in my first job at Yahoo. Similarly, at my second job, where I was the first hire, there were just the 2 co-founders who had an idea. And right from finding the office to building a team to going through difficult times, having to part with team members, getting funded, getting acquired, staying on with the acquiring team for a year to consolidate and build and grow. So all of those experiences were very entrepreneurial. I think the Flipkart experience obviously was extremely entrepreneurial. Joining Flipkart when we were in a 2-bedroom house with very little structure or processes or even furniture, and to then help build the company and doing whatever it took. So while I started off as the head of engineering, I ended up doing whatever it took, whether it was customer support or it was aspects of building HR processes and systems. I had a couple of entrepreneurial roles within Flipkart, where I was running an ebooks product and a digital music product, as well as a payment product. So those experiences, even though for only a year, were actually very, very fulfilling. So I think in some sense, I've been very fortunate through my life to have been put into situations which in some sense required me to be entrepreneurial, or I was amidst entrepreneurial people. And mix of all of that led to them.
So entrepreneurship has been a huge part of your personal life as well.
Yeah, I think barring, so formally what is thought of as entrepreneurship, which is, okay, you have to start a venture. So Udhyam is my first venture that I am starting. But I feel that being entrepreneurial has been almost a requirement for surviving and thriving for most of my life.
Right. So you are familiar with the term that Udhyam uses and emphasizes upon, which is entrepreneur mindset. And I want to get an understanding of what that means, what that comprises, and why the emphasis on it.
Yeah, so I think this is exactly what we were talking about, right? That being entrepreneurial in life is simply put what it means to have an entrepreneurial mindset. I'll take a few minutes to maybe just describe what mindsets are. So as I was starting to learn about education a little more formally after I quit my corporate job, I learned that educationists talk about learning in the form of KSM, knowledge, skills, and mindsets. And then when I look at practice, I see our education system to be very, very knowledge centric. You are assessed primarily on what do you know or what do you remember. There is a little bit of skill in terms of being able to write an exam, being able to prepare for a high stakes event. So there are some of those skills that get built. But when we think about mindsets, there are, while there are lofty vision that, say, the NCF 2005 puts, which is a beautiful document, but there isn't a goal that we set that, hey, what are the mindsets that we would like to build amongst our youth? So that's the education background. Now, if you compare that with where life is today, knowledge or information at least is available at the tap of a finger or a voice command. So if students were able to take exams with cell phones or with the Siri along with them, like they would ace the exams, because Siri can answer most questions that are asked with very, very little difficulty. But that's what we continue to assess in most of our exams. Skill, while important, is the half-life of a skill is actively getting shorter and shorter. Earlier, like in my parents' generation, you would be like, you acquire one skill and then you use that skill through your working life. Today, it's very, very common that you would acquire one skill and maybe you would use it for the first 5 years, maybe 10 years. But after that, you will need to either go much, much deeper, specialize, pick up another skill. So learning has almost again become a requirement. Learning new skills has become a requirement. Mindsets, on the other hand, I feel have a much, much larger and longer impact. That it's the way you live your life and that can possibly guide you throughout your life. So even though there was much lesser research and information about what or how mindsets might be built, I was pulled strongly towards working on building mindsets. Okay, so now to answer your specific questions, what are entrepreneurial mindsets? Entrepreneurial mindsets, or mindset, is how you approach life. When you are in a situation, what is your default nature? What is your second nature? When you fall from a cycle, do you choose to give up learning how to cycle, or do you have the grit to get back on and try again and fall again? Right, and that is the mindset of grit. Right. When you see everybody going for a movie that you probably don't think you will enjoy, do you go ahead with the peer group because that's what the peer group does, or do you exercise independent thinking and decide that no, you're probably going to stay the movie out and do something else that you think you will enjoy? And now that choice, and these are choices that we make every day, many times a day in our lives. Mindsets are what enable us to make these choices. Entrepreneurial mindsets are what the kind of choices an entrepreneur makes. The reason to call them entrepreneurial is that they are easily manifested and it's easily visible that an entrepreneur is going to operate more independently. The entrepreneur is going to be more gritty. The entrepreneur is more experimental. And the entrepreneur is a lot more self-aware. And those are the 4 key mindsets that Udhyam works on.
I want to talk about the Shiksha initiative of Udhyam Learning Foundation. And so the goal of the initiative, as you mentioned on your website, is to enable an entrepreneurial drive in more than 1 crore youth by 2025. Over the next 3 years, what are some of the key developments within Shiksha initiative and outside of it that you believe will help you achieve this goal?
Yeah, I think so. First, just a quick introduction to Udhyam Shiksha. So as part of Udhyam Shiksha, what we try and do is to build entrepreneurial mindsets amongst young people. For this, we followed a few strategies. Our most successful strategy has been to partner with state governments and to work alongside state governments to help build curriculum that then becomes a part of the timetable in government schools and government ITIs. We now work in about 9 states and at various different stages, where I think in 3 of the states we are now at full statewide rollouts, while in I think 3 states we are just piloting. Now, along with the government program, we also have programs where we use technology to take experiences to learners. We worked with UNICEF on a chatbot called Fundu, which helps build life skills and entrepreneurial mindsets on WhatsApp. So that's something that we work directly with UNICEF on, and users engage with us through WhatsApp. I think these are the 2 larger pieces. Let me now come to your question on what are the plans for the next 3 or 4 years, and maybe before I jump to the plans, hey, what happens is this entrepreneurial mindset curriculum. I'll use Delhi as an example, which is the state where we are most, I would say, have been working the longest, and our program has been the deepest. So with Delhi government, grades 9 to 12, the first period every day is this curriculum called EMC, Entrepreneurship Mindset Curriculum, that we've helped co-create with SCRT and a bunch of other organizations. This curriculum is experiential, so it's activity-based, and it is a curriculum that does not have any evaluation. Along with this in-classroom experience of students like debating with each other and then having to switch topics to help build critical thinking, or building the tallest tower in groups with no other guidance. So they start with notebooks and pencils and pens, realize that they aren't tall enough, and then use bags. And finally, as in, you see benches being turned because that makes your tower taller, or people standing on each other's shoulders. And this kind of activity leading to students thinking about what's possible. A very important part of this is the reflection that happens after the activities, that allows students to reflect and figure out in what times are they able to use these mindsets and when are they not. Along with this in-class experience that happens, a large piece that happens with students is a business project, where students run a business project for a period of time. For this, in Delhi's case, Delhi has actually given students in 11th and 12th, every child, ₹2,000 to try an entrepreneurial project. So with about 3 lakh students participating in this month of November that just went by, we had about 51,000 projects being done by students across the state. There was a lot of energy, euphoria amongst students as they went around solving problems around them. So from hand-knitted stuff to motorized wheelchairs to devices that prevent shops from being looted. Students came up with all kinds of ideas and then actually built them out and sold them. The Delhi government also engaged in putting some of this on television in the form of Business Blasters, a TV show similar to Shark Tank that allowed the broader society to get an idea of what our young people are capable of. And I think this practical project has been very impactful in helping both the students as well as everyone else around them see what our youth are capable of if they are unconstrained. Along with these, there is a piece around enabling students to interact with entrepreneurs called live entrepreneur interactions. I think over 1,000 entrepreneurs have interacted with Delhi school students virtually or physically, mostly virtual in the last 2 years, unfortunately, but physically before that. And this has had the who's who, right from Madam Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw to Sanjeev Bikhchandani and Abhiraj and Sairi and a whole bunch of people from the startup ecosystem. And given my past in the startup ecosystem, I've heard back from a lot of them about just how happy they were to have participated in this program, and how they think of it as something that can really enable young people to get much wider exposure than schools otherwise allow. I think of the EMC program as a way to reduce the gap between the real world and the school. So that's broadly what the EMC program or the Udhyam Shiksha program is like. We do similar programs with other states in ITIs in Haryana and Kerala, in schools in Andhra Pradesh and Uttarakhand and others. In terms of what's next for us, I think one is to deepen our work. That we want to enable, at least in 5 states, that the program gets deeply institutionalized, like it has in, say, Delhi and Haryana, where teachers understand the intentions behind this, or a lot more teachers understand the intentions behind this and are able to facilitate this with high quality. And that's a new skill for a lot of teachers to build. So working closely with teachers to be able to enable them to build this skill, working with students and the government to build the business project capabilities so that they can execute them better, and being able to showcase that to their parents, to society, and maybe to on TV to larger audiences. And I think overall, being able to measure the mindset growth in students through this. Now, that's the trickiest part. There aren't today global measures of even some of the skills that we work on, like communication. There isn't a standard assessment of communication or problem solving. When it comes to mindsets like independence and grit, that's even harder. How do you assess how often and how much is a child becoming independent or becoming grittier? But we believe that with actions, or starting to measure actions, we could possibly take a few steps in that direction. And that's an important step for us. So broadly, in the next 3 years, I see Udhyam Shiksha growing a lot more in depth in terms of quality of experience and learning outcomes and being able to measure it. And then in breadth, we work in 9 states. I expect that programs like ours would then get implemented either directly by us or through partners in hopefully about 20 states by 2025. And along with this, programs that use technology like the WhatsApp chatbot could enable us to reach and enable agentic thinking and doing, or entrepreneurial drive amongst 1 crore youth.
So you have spoken a little bit about this partnering and collaborating with state governments and other non-governmental agencies. So we'll just talk about that a little bit more. What kind of a role do you think these stakeholders, governmental and non-governmental, play in bringing this tangible change in the sector of entrepreneurship and social change? And also, how have they bolstered Udhyam Learning Foundation's work itself?
So I think for Udhyam and for me, impact at scale is a key motive, or is the key driver. And as I was researching education before I started Udhyam, I realized that this is not a sector which learns rapidly. And even though there are islands of excellence in education that exist, that doesn't mean that some of those practices have gotten adopted at scale for various reasons. I think that, combined with the fact that about 55% of our students study in government schools. So being able to reach out to that 55%, and often this 55% is the economically less off 55%, because parents in India prefer to send their kids to private schools if they have the money, made partnering with government a no-brainer. We also wanted that, we had realized that as we worked with learners out of school, after school, on weekends, in vacations, that our students, our young ones, are very busy. with the school. So the realization that we had to actually get into the school and get in the timetable was an important one for us. I think once these were made, we were clear that we had to partner with state governments. And we're lucky that Delhi government reached out to us because they wanted to build the entrepreneurship curriculum, which we nudged them to move to more broader and make it entrepreneurship mindset curriculum. And that then laying the foundation of our other work. So similar, at very, very similar time, started working with the Haryana government. I think the power of working with the government is first that you get to operate at very large scale. You are able to, so in Delhi, for example, we are able to reach 7.5 lakh students every year, right? And then this changes every year as new students come into grade 9. I also think that there is, as in philanthropically, you cannot raise the kind of money that the government already spends on education. So if you can influence that money that is already being spent on education to have more relevant and higher learning outcomes, we would create much, much larger impact. So if you think about it, that the first period every day, that's 40 minutes every day from grades 9 to 12 for 7.5 lakh student is many crore learning hours being spent on a topic like entrepreneurship mindset curriculum, which otherwise, if we were doing it alone, would be near impossible to get to that scale with philanthropic money. So I believe that, especially in the development sector, it's imperative that one partners, and even more imperative that one partners with the government to, if impact at scale, are key drivers.
So another initiative of Udhyam Learning Foundation is Vyapar, which reaches out to nano-businesses, right? What do you think are some of the key aspects to sort of keep in mind when scaling up smaller businesses? And how have your sub-projects within Vyapar aided in this task?
So with Udhyam Vyapar, I think a simple goal has been to lead to economic and social growth for the nanopreneurs. And these are Vyaparis all around us, right? Like this is the tea shop, the ironing entrepreneur. So there are about almost 6 crore such entrepreneurs in the country. What are things that we could do to enable their growth? And we've tried and experimented many things. One of the initiatives that has created significant impact is actually a design thinking led initiative around enabling the ironing entrepreneurs to move from coal as a source of energy to LPG. So realizing just the amount of time they spend managing coal and how expensive it is and how unhealthy it is, to start experimenting with what might be the alternatives, figuring out LPG as a possible or a viable alternative, and then helping test that out, and then helping a bunch of entrepreneurs to use it. And now we are working in a way to figure out that how does the whole retail supply chain work so that the LPG iron box is a lot more available, is affordable, whether it means working with the financiers, so NBFCs who could lend money so that entrepreneurs can buy this, or it means working with the retailers or HP, Indane, and other ironing gas agencies who could then distribute this. So with this particular initiative, we are now working at an ecosystem level to enable this to happen first in Bangalore, and then the intention is to take this to other locations. We have a similar, the other initiative that we have in Vyapar is about entrepreneurs being able to learn a few new things. And there we've experimented quite a bit. A few things that have worked well, but not necessarily at scale, include how does an entrepreneur go online? How do you start using WhatsApp for business? How do you become available on Google Maps? How do you start taking online payments? So using digital technology to grow your business has been one area. I think another area that's worked well for us is to enable entrepreneurs to get new customers. So what might be strategies for them to try and get new customers, whether it is through referrals, whether it is through coupons and codes, or word of mouth. So those are the kind of things that Udhyam Vyapar has tried. Udhyam Vyapar's relatively more nascent compared to Udhyam Shiksha and operates at lesser scale. But Udhyam Vyapar's impact is a lot more measurable. Like we, for example, know that every entrepreneur who moves from coal to LPG on an average makes about 2,700 rupees more every month. So it's a lot more measurable and tangible economic impact compared to our struggles with measuring mindsets in Udhyam Shiksha.
I am actually glad that you brought up this coal and LPG example, because we can now move to the next question seamlessly, because Udhyam also adheres to the sustainable development goals, right, which are set by the United Nations. What have been the challenges in making exactly these kind of sustainable shifts from going to coal to LPG, something that you discussed a little bit right now? And how have you navigated your way through fulfilling these goals?
Yeah, I think of I think of sustainability slightly more deeply. I think this one is very tangible and very visible. You're moving to a more sustainable energy source, and hence it's a lot more visible. But even with our Udhyam Shiksha work, I think of systemic change, which will last even without us. Right. So in Haryana, for example, in our work, the team is now eager to get out of Haryana because we've enabled the Haryana government to be able to operate the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum, which is called Udyami Haryana there, in a way that's as good as we would do it, and over the last 3 years. So I think driving systemic change where the system itself changes and hence the change is sustainable is the way that we feel most sustainable change can be brought about. And there, the key drivers are collaboration, and especially partnering with government. I have probably made it sound that this is a must do. Yes, it is a must do, but it is super hard. So when you ask about challenges to making sustainable change, I think change itself is hard, right? And very often we are tempted to make changes that are easily in our control. But for change to be sustainable, my view is that the larger ecosystem has to start shifting and start changing. There have to be a lot more believers of the change that you want to drive, whether it is coal to LPG. So it's not just the ironing entrepreneur, but the retailer, the financier, the distributor, all of this has to change for this shift to become sustainable. Similarly, when we talk about entrepreneurial mindsets and learning that's a lot more relevant in today's world, it's the teacher, it's the head of the school, the principal, the Department of Education, the politician, the parents, and the student. All of them have to be part of this change to happen. And that's non-trivial. I think that is what really makes making the sustainable development goals really hard, that it's not something that one person can do in isolation. These are changes that have to be brought about by collaboration and with communities. And that requires capacity building at the community level. Whether it's teachers becoming facilitators, the entrepreneurship mindset coordinator, really becoming like a business coach and facilitating the journey for learners. I think that capacity building is a key lever to making some of this happen.
So, I think it's impossible to talk about social change without talking about the current context of the pandemic that we're in. And the pandemic has brought about many changes, hurdles, and in fact, even innovations. So I want to understand from you, what kind of an impact do you think the pandemic has had on the evolving ecosystem of entrepreneurship in India? And what does the future look like? I know it's a big question, but
yeah, I think first, maybe I'll start with my own personal experiences of the pandemic. Right? That I feel what I experienced was a very large number of people starting to work on problems that otherwise would be called development sector problems. So the number of people who started participating in organizing fundraisers, finding ration and food, ensuring vaccination happens or masking happens. So I feel like the pandemic broke boundaries of, I am a corporate person, so I'm not going to engage in social work. We saw everybody, and we saw a very, very large number of people volunteering for what you would call development work. And that for me was super heartening, that the amount of human energy that poured out in the face of the pandemic, which was disastrous for us, I think was a huge silver lining around this big pandemic. I think the people who struggled and suffered the most are the two sets of people that Udhyam works with. So the first set of people that have suffered the most are students. Schools have been shut for 2 years. And while the economically well-off students have seamlessly transitioned to online schooling, that's been impossible in government schools, right? A very, very small percentage, varying between 10 to 20% of students have access to devices to be able to do online schooling. A slightly larger number of students have access to a phone at some times in a day to be able to take lessons or worksheets on a WhatsApp through PDF files that teachers might share, right? But in the absence of all of these, I think the learning that a student experiences, not just the academic learning, but just playing with their friends, interacting with teachers, doing things together, all of that is something that students have completely missed out on. So I think that's and I don't I think I carry that as a wound. It's just a burden that all of us have experienced. I hope now that schools reopen soon. Worldwide, schools have reopened, and a lot more countries now have schools open than not. And I hope India gets there too. I think the second set of people who've struggled the most are the informal and the nano entrepreneurs. As I speak about, I'm talking from Bangalore right now. Bangalore has a weekend curfew, right? Which means that all the small darshanis and small hotels that serve food, which see most amount of crowds on weekends, are unable to serve them unless they are partnering with a Swiggy or a Zomato. Ironing entrepreneurs are not able to work over the weekend. And in general, remote working means that a lot of people are happy to show up without unironed clothes. And that means their business has gotten impacted. So at the basic demand level. So I think these have been probably the largest impact. So on one side, there is the amount of human energy available for volunteering to solve problems. But on the other side, I think systemically, I think these two audiences have struggled a lot during the pandemic.
Just to get a sense of, it's not part of the question, but do you see this improvement happening in the future, or do you think with the current state of not knowing about anything about the pandemic, how long it will last, what new variants come, are we going to remain static for a while?
So I'm actually very hopeful, right? That I think a large number of countries have already opened up schools and are now following the process of no lockdowns. And I hope India can get there too. I'm also hopeful because the newest variant is much milder, and we are seeing much lesser rates of hospitalizations and severity. So I think both of these combined, I'm very hopeful that within a month or two, we see the end of this pandemic. But I think we've said that at the beginning of every year, and the pandemic's bounced back. I feel at a minimum, we need to be prepared for being hit again, but to deal with it in more inclusive fashion, to deal with it while making schools run. And I think we have to find ways to make schools run. I think shutting down the school is easy, but I think if we work together and find ways of how can schools run while keeping the pandemic at bay or reducing risk, I think those are important things to decide on and make happen.
Yeah. And on that very hopeful note, we actually bring our Impact Talk session to an end. Thank you so much for being a part of this talk and sharing your valuable insights and ideas with us. And yes, thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting me. Thank you for the questions. And I hope that all of us see the end of this pandemic in the next few months.